Welcome back, guys. Today's episode, I am sharing 10 true Appalachian horror stories. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. They say the Appalachians remember every footstep that's ever pressed their soil, and if you wandered too deep, they remind you of things you'd rather not know. My name's Elijah. I was born and raised in a crooked little hollow outside Buck, West Virginia, where the mountains crowd close enough that the sun disappears early. Folks here whisper about the Lantern Man, a tale used to scare children and sober up drunks staggering home from the bar. I grew up half laughing at the stories, thinking it was just another fireside bogey. But now I avoid the ridge after dark because I saw him with my own eyes. And it wasn't some ghost tale. It was real. It all happened one autumn night, late September, when the days still hold warmth but the evenings turn sharp, the kind of weather that makes the forest floor crunch underfoot with fallen leaves. I'd gone out scouting alone, shotgun slung light across my shoulder, not to hunt but to mark deer sign for the coming season. The ridge behind my granddad's place was my destination. Dense, tangle-thick woods, the kind most strangers can't navigate without getting spun around. But I knew the paths, the stones, the streams like second nature. The first odd thing happened as dusk slid in quick, sinking the hollow into cold shadow. Through the trees, I spotted a faint golden glow. At first, I figured it was somebody's lantern or flashlight, another hunter trespassing on our family land. So I cupped my hands around my mouth and called, "Evenin'!" It echoed, swallowed by the woods. The glow didn't pause, didn't turn, didn't flicker. It simply kept drifting, steady as a pendulum, weaving through the darkest thickets like the undergrowth wasn't even real. I quickened my pace. Nobody out here should be walking this deep without a reason. Lantern or not, the terrain's treacherous. Sinkholes, sudden drops, tangles that could break an ankle. Yet the light kept sliding so smooth it roused an unease I couldn't name. Thinking, still half-rational, I pressed forward. The glow dipped behind a ridge, then reappeared brighter like it was waiting. A strange smell hit me then, iron-strong, metallic, beneath it the faint sting of char, like old smoke clinging to clothes. The forest, alive with crickets minutes ago, seemed to quiet with every step I took. That stillness should have been my warning. Instead, curiosity overrode good sense, and I kept following. And then, just past a clutch of pines, I saw the lantern stop. It stood still, swaying gently until, slow as the turning of a head, it pivoted in the dark, facing me. I froze. My breath sent clouds into the cooling air, each puff far too loud against the silence surrounding me. The lantern lifted, its glow spilling across the figure that held it. My stomach turned to water. He wasn't like any hunter or hiker I'd ever seen. The man was gaunt, clothes hanging in tatters of what might have once been old hunting gear, flannel shredded, canvas trousers stiff with clotted dirt. His skin looked strange, pale as wax, almost glowing under the lantern's golden light. But it was his face that pinned me to the spot. His eyes were buried in shadow, empty pits that swallowed the light whole. Yet his mouth stretched across his face in a too-wide smile. His teeth, at least what the lantern caught, looked too numerous and too sharp, like something that never belonged inside a human jaw. I tried to speak, but only a dry croak came out. The figure didn't blink, didn't twitch. Instead, he raised the lantern higher in one hand. With the motion came a sound unlike anything I'd heard. A thin keening, a whistle strung with sorrow. It didn't come from the woods. It came from him, from that slit of a mouth, a noise that needled right into my bones and made the hair on my arms stand stiff. I staggered backward, boot crunching on something soft beneath the leaves. Glancing down in the dim, my stomach lurched. An old, torn jacket sleeve, rotted and half buried in the dirt. Through the fabric jutted something pale and unmistakably hard, a bone. My hands shook as I fumbled at my shotgun, but some instinct screamed not to raise it. Not because I didn't want to fire, but because it felt meaningless, like shooting at fog. The lantern man took one step forward. The air compressed, sharp with the stink of rusted iron. He didn't drag the lantern along with him. It seemed to float, still swaying in that weird, calm rhythm. Behind him, now illuminated, the ground seemed disturbed. Piles of leaves, soil scattered. And then I recognized what lay under them. Boots, remnants of hunting caps, splayed bones. Dozens of them. The realization hit me harder than the cold. I was standing in a graveyard no one alive had ever marked. And the thing holding the lantern, he wasn't its guardian. He was its gatherer. My panic snapped. I turned and bolted, tearing through brambles, catching my shirt, ripping my skin as I fled downhill. My lungs burned, but the noise behind me burned worse. The keening whistle had grown louder, weaving through the trees, threading into my skull like it wanted inside my mind. Still, I ran. No matter how far I went, the glow stayed at the edge of vision. Branches lashed my arms, rocks bruised my shins, but the lantern never faltered, never fell behind. It wasn't chasing with speed. It didn't need to. It was stalking, deliberate, knowing its prey was already trapped. The dark woods seemed endless. No familiar rock or tree offering me bearings until the slope suddenly dipped and I tumbled onto gravel. The driveway. Home. I whipped around, gasping. The forest behind me was dark now. No glow, no figure. Just whispering leaves. My shotgun was gone, torn from me somewhere in the panic. It didn't matter. I stumbled inside, bolting doors as if wood could fend off whatever I'd fled. The sheriff came by next morning, after I called half-coherent in terror. We hiked back to the ridge. Nothing. No lantern, no bones in the leaves, no churned-up ground. He clapped my shoulder, told me I'd seen swamp gas or mistaken moonlight, city-slick superstition. No such thing as ghosts, he smirked. But I know what silence he didn't mention. The dead hush of that forest. The way the air carved itself out around me. I haven't walked those woods at night since. Truth is, I barely stepped past the porch after sundown. I know now the Appalachian hollows aren't empty, not the places our maps forget. Something lures wanderers deeper with that lantern glow. Something collects them, keeps them in shallow dirt where no prayers reach. Every time I see fall settle in, smell wood smoke on the breeze, I get the taste of iron in the back of my throat. And in the corner of my dreams, there's always that faint, mocking glow, swaying just out of reach. Folks around here keep saying the Lantern Man might just be the ghost of a hunter who lost his way. But I know the truth down to my marrow. He isn't lost. He's hunting. And when the Appalachians remember your name, they never, ever forget. My name's Curtis, and I was raised in McDowell County, West Virginia, the kind of place where coal dust clings to everything, your boots, your lungs, even your soul. My daddy and his daddy before him worked the mines their whole lives, and I followed suit. Around here, mining isn't just work, it's survival. But if you talk to the old-timers sitting outside the diner downtown, they'll tell you about places even miners refuse to dig. The kind of shafts whispered about in half-sentences, warnings dressed as jokes. One of those places was Harker's Mine. Harker's was sealed up back in the 1940s after 3 men went missing inside. Official word was a collapse, their bodies never recovered. My uncle, who worked that ridge, swore it was something else. He said the men wouldn't stop hollering about hearing songs in the dark, voices that didn't belong, until one night they went down and just never came back. I always brushed the rumors off as miners' tales, exaggerated by time and grief. But 20-odd years ago, a mining company started prospecting near that same ridge. I was in my 20s, one of the young bloods willing to do the hard jobs nobody else wanted. They sent me and 2 others, Benny and Floyd, to survey the sealed shaft. Just to check stability, take notes, no digging or blasting. That was the plan. We hiked up before dawn, when the ridges were still swallowed in fog. The air up there always had a taste of rust and old ash, like the earth itself remembered where coal fires had once burned out of control. By the time we pried open rusted supports and wedged ourselves past the collapsed timbers, my nerves buzzed sharper than they should have. I'd grown up underground. Mines were supposed to feel like home, but this felt different. Wrong. Inside, the shaft sloped steep, walls streaked with black veins glinting in our helmet lights. Dust thick enough to taste coated our tongues. Floyd cracked jokes about ghosts to lighten the mood, and Benny laughed too loud. No one wanted to admit we were unsettled already. That's when I heard it. Faint. So faint I thought it was blood pounding in my ears. But when we stopped moving, it was clearer. A low humming, almost like a woman's voice carrying a tune from deep inside the walls. We froze, lamps flicking toward each other's pale, tense faces. Benny hissed, "Did you hear that?" The song drifted again, mournful and sweet, floating from the black cuts ahead. And just like that, I wished with everything in me we hadn't unsealed Harker's mine at all. At first, Floyd laughed it off, said it was air moving through collapsed chambers, creating a whistling illusion. But I'd heard plenty of mine drafts in my years underground, and none had ever sounded like a woman singing children's lullabies. We pressed deeper, because none of us wanted to admit we were ready to run over nothing. Our boots crunched loose shale. Every footfall sent echoes chasing themselves back. The humming drew stronger the further down we went, weaving up and down scales in a slow, almost tender rhythm. It reminded me of my mama humming when cooking at the stove, except softer, sadder, soaked in grief. Around one bend we found carvings scratched into the walls. They weren't minor marks, too rough, too frantic. Jagged spirals, stick-like figures. Long rows of hatch marks, dozens, maybe hundreds. Benny muttered that it looked like someone had been keeping count. My stomach sank when I realized the tally marks weren't grouped in any neat, consistent blocks. They were carved desperate, chaotic, gouged into the rock with shaking hands. Then came the first scream, a high screech. Not the singing anymore, but a shriek bouncing off every seam of rock. Floyd dropped his light and nearly stumbled. Instantly, the mine plunged partway into dark, only my and Benny's lamps stabbing against the black. Floyd scrambled and cursed, but in between his sounds, the voice rose again. Only now it wasn't humming. It was words, none I could understand. The syllables ran together like broken hymns, stretched vowels layered with whispers behind them. I swear on my name I heard multiple voices blending like a choir, though the sound bent wrong. Low tones we felt in our bones, high pitches that rattled our teeth. Ahead, deeper in the shaft, something shifted. Rocks groaned as though weight pressed from inside, not above. Dust shook loose, raining down fine grit into our hair and mouths. My gut went tight as wire. Whatever was making that sound wasn't trapped air, wasn't just rock. "Let's go," I whispered. Benny didn't argue, but as we turned back, our lamps caught something on the ground. Right in the middle of the passage sat a helmet, old-fashioned, carbide style, dust-caked. Inside it lay a skull, jaw open as if crying out. The singing swelled again, rushing over us like icy water. The tunnel behind us seemed smaller now, darker, like the mine itself was closing its throat to keep us in. We ran. No pretense, no dignity. Just full sprint, boots cracking shale, lungs heaving. The song followed. Louder than our own pounding blood, it wrapped around us. Notes that slithered and bent like something alive. I swear I felt breath that wasn't mine on my neck as I charged toward the exit shaft. Rocks shifted. Timbers popped overhead as if furious at our escape. Floyd stumbled hard, sprawling face first. Benny and I yanked him back up, but his lamp never relit. His panic was blood-curdling, hands clawing our jackets in the dark. I tried to drag him, but the singing had changed yet again. Now it came from behind us and in front of us, as if the mine had grown a dozen mouths. Floyd screamed then, louder than he'd ever shouted a day in his life. I turned my lamp just long enough to see white arms, skeletal, too many, reaching from cracks in the rock, curling toward him. The helmet skull we'd passed was gone. Benny and I pulled Floyd with everything we had, and somehow we burst into the gray light outside. The moment all three of us touched the surface, the sound cut off. Instantly. No echo, no hum. Just the tired morning breeze brushing the ridge. We collapsed in silence, none of us speaking. But I'll never forget Floyd's face. His lips were cracked and bleeding, his eyes wild. It wasn't until later we noticed the scars. Thin, horizontal scratches across his arms and chest, like he'd been scraped by dozens of tiny blades. None of us spoke of what we saw him dragged by. Who would believe it? We sealed the shaft again, piling collapsed timbers and marking the entrance unstable. To outsiders, it remains just another dead tunnel in an old coal ridge. But Benny never mined again after that day. Floyd lived another 2 years before he drank himself to death, nightmares clawing him from the inside out. And me? I still hear it sometimes. On windless nights, half asleep, that soft hum, like a lullaby, coaxing something deep in me to stir. If anyone asks, I tell them Harker's mine was sealed for safety, that it's dangerous, unstable. But the truth is simpler, and so much colder. The mountains don't bury their mistakes. They keep them singing, forever, underneath the rock. My name is Ruth, and I grew up in Clay County, Kentucky, where the mountains swallow towns whole if you blink too long. Folks here are poor, proud, and stubborn, but one thing most of us agree on is that the old Pinewood Church up on Coldwater Ridge ain't right. Officially, it's been abandoned since the 1960s. The roof caved partly in, the paint peeled away until it was bare gray wood. But everyone around here will tell you the same thing, that church doesn't stay empty. My granddaddy was the first to scare me about it. He'd point up toward the ridge where between tree branches you could just glimpse the leaning steeple and say, "Don't you ever go wandering there alone, Ruthie. That church takes more than it gives." I thought it was just a story meant to keep me from roaming into trouble. But when I was 15, I found out he was telling me the plain truth. It was late summer, with the air hanging thick and buggy, when me and my cousin Danielle snuck out. She was daring, wild in ways I wasn't. She came up with the idea to sneak into Coldwater Church. "Bet it ain't nothing but raccoons and spiders," she teased, laughing at the way I wrung my hands. I told her the stories, but she just grinned. "Then we'll say a prayer for your granddaddy's ghost stories." We hiked up under moonlight, cicadas buzzing so loud they masked our whispers. The ridge loomed taller with every step, trees twisting like crooked fingers pointing us forward. When we reached the clearing, I saw it for the first time, the sagging church with its heavy cross still nailed on the weathered steeple. In the dark, it looked less like a house of worship and more like a warning planted in wood. Danielle laughed under her breath and pushed the door open. It creaked, loud enough to announce us to the whole hollow. Inside smelled of rot and mildew, the air damp and heavy. Our flashlight beams cut through the dust, catching splinters that drifted like drifting ash. And then we both froze. Because though this church had been abandoned for decades, candles flickered faintly on the altar, 5 of them burning steady, with wax pooled thick around their bases. That's when I knew we hadn't walked into an empty place. Danielle whispered, "Somebody's been here," but her voice trembled despite her grin. We stepped further inside, feet creaking against warped planks. The pews, cracked and broken, were covered in odd scratches. At first I thought it was vandalism, but the marks were too organized. Rows of straight gouges like tally marks carved into the wood. Over and over, across every pew. The air seemed to hum faintly, like the vibration of distant music. It wasn't coming from outside. It was rooted in the church itself, a strange low thrum rising from the floorboards. I blinked at Danielle, who gave a short, brave scoff and marched right up toward the altar. That's when I noticed something worse. The 5 candles weren't the only thing standing on the altar. Beside them lay a Bible, torn down the middle, pages shredded and blackened at the edges. It didn't look like time had eaten it, something had burned it intentionally. And cradled inside the ripped bindings was what I first mistook for an old rag doll. But as Danielle leaned closer, the light caught its face, and I realized it was no doll. It was taxidermy, a small animal, maybe a fox or raccoon, but its mouth had been sewn shut with black thread. Its glass eyes gleamed madly, reflecting our light like they were alive. Danielle hissed, "We should go." Finally, her bravado cracked. She grabbed my wrist. That's when the sound began. It started as a single voice, faint but clear as a hymn. A woman's voice, singing words I didn't understand but in rhythm like Sunday services my mama dragged me to. Then the harmonies joined in, deeper, older, too many to count. Voices rose from every corner of that rotten church, filling it up, surrounding us. Our flashlight beams jittered mad as our hands shook, searching. The pews were empty, but the voices grew louder until it felt like a packed congregation singing from every direction. Shadows lengthened across the cracked floorboards, bending wrong against the light. Then we heard the slam of a door from the back of the church, even though it had long been boarded shut. The candles flared, suddenly brighter, and something moved behind the altar, standing slowly. What rose behind the altar wasn't like any preacher, past or present. The figure was tall, gaunt, draped in what looked like old vestments, though shredded and black with soot. Its head tilted sharply, neck wrong, as though it had snapped but decided not to stay broken. Where its face should have been, there was only a mask carved crudely of wood, a cross etched deep into its front. Behind the slits, 2 pinpoints of fire red gleamed. The singing grew louder, tenfold louder, as the thing raised its arms. In one skeletal hand it clutched a twisted wooden staff topped with nails, and when it slammed it against the floor, the entire structure groaned like it was alive. Danielle screamed first. Instinct ripped me loose and I yanked at her hand. We sprinted as the sound surged, the pews rattling like they were filled with an invisible crowd. In the back of my vision, shadows of figures stood, rows of them, lined like parishioners rising to sing. A whole silent congregation except for their endless hymn. The church door we'd entered through felt impossibly far, like the aisle had stretched. I swear the walls pulled closer, breathing. But somehow, in blind terror, we tore through the doorway and stumbled into the night air. The moment our feet hit grass, the voices cut off, so sharp it made my ears ring. We never looked back. We tore down the ridge until our lungs screamed. When we finally burst into my granddaddy's yard, we collapsed crying, unable to put words to what we saw. He knew, though. When he heard us sob about the altar, his face hardened. He spat tobacco and said, "Told you. That place don't hold worship. It holds memory, and nothing holy." I never went back. Neither did Danielle. Folks in town still whisper of strange lights up on Coldwater Ridge, and sometimes hunters coming down swore they heard voices drifting through the trees, low hymns sung by no one they could see. Whenever I pass the shadow of that ridge, I bow my head quick, whispering my own prayer under my breath, because I know what waits in that church. It isn't God. It isn't people either. It's the mountains themselves remembering the faith that rotted there and twisting it to keep the pews full forever. And mark me on this. Coldwater Church doesn't forgive trespassers. It collects them. Name's Travis. I've hauled freight through the back roads of Kentucky, Virginia, and West Virginia for near 30 years. Trucking's my bread and butter, but I've also spent plenty of time on shortcuts and dirt roads locals just call the holler paths. See, I trust GPS less than I trust my own gut, and in the mountains. Gut instinct can be life or death. Let me tell you about a strip of road that near cost me both. I was running a small load of lumber late one autumn evening, headed south toward Hazard, Kentucky. Route 1629 cuts quiet through valleys, but I wanted faster time. So an old-timer at the filling station mentioned a road dropping off the main drag, winding through a hollow and rejoining near East Hazard. "Save you 15 minutes," he said. Then he added soft, "But don't take it after sundown." I brushed him off. Truckers like him tell spooky tales like folks pass salt, something to keep you wary on lonely rides. By the time I reached that turnoff, it was good and dark, moon thin as a fingernail clipping. I swung my rig onto the narrow road, tires crunching gravel. Dense woods folded in over both sides, branches clawing at my mirrors. At first it was just quiet road driving, radio humming low. But within minutes everything changed. My headlights cut ahead into thick fog, so thick and sudden I couldn't see more than 30 feet. I slowed to a crawl. Then I noticed the silence. I keep my window cracked when I drive, always like the feel of air, but now, not a cricket, not a nightbird, just still air heavy like wool. Another mile in, I realized the odometer hadn't flipped properly. It was stuck. The road itself seemed longer than it should have been. And then I saw the first car, a sedan, pale green, sitting sideways across a stretch of dirt turnout. Rust caked on it thick like a barn relic. Only thing was, the headlights flicked on, harsh and blinding. My CB sputtered static at the same time, crackling like a whispering voice. Then the sedan blinked out, gone, no car, just empty gravel. I tightened my hands on the wheel hard enough to ache. That's when I finally remembered the man's warning. Don't take it at night. I tried shaking it off, chalking it up to headlights reflecting weird in the fog. But the more I drove, the more the strangeness grew. Another mile or two forward, I spotted figures on the sides of the road. Travelers, at least they looked like it. A woman in a bonnet, barefoot, her dress ragged. A man in suspenders, shoulders slumped. My high beams lit them clearly, but when I passed, they didn't move or wave. They just stared. Their eyes were black. No reflection, no pupils catching the beam. Just sucking dark pits following my truck as I crawled by. I grabbed the CB handset, cussed to myself, and tried hailing for anyone awake on Channel 19. Static answered, but behind it, I swore I heard that same whisper, like my name stretched stranger than a human tongue could form it. Fog thickened. My windshield gleamed wet, though no rain fell. Trees grew closer. Then something worse, road signs. They popped up on my right every few minutes. Not the green dot ones, no. These were wooden, crude, hand-painted. Keep driving. Next one. Don't stop. The third chilled me. You're already late. My stomach nodded. I'd been on that road maybe 40 minutes, way past when I should have rejoined the highway. The odometer needle twitched, stuck, miles unread. I smacked the dash, useless. Finally, I spotted headlights approaching. Thank God, I thought, another vehicle. But relief died quick. The vehicle I met was my own. I don't mean another rig like mine. I mean the same color, same trailer, same dent on the side panel I'd put there myself 3 months earlier. It barreled toward me fast. I swerved just in time, mirrors rattling as the other me slammed past, disappearing into the fog like I'd been erased from the road. That snapped the last of my nerve. I put the pedal down, praying for an exit, hell-bent on escaping whatever hollow this was. That's when the fog began to glow behind me in the mirrors, headlights flaring all around, though no vehicles were visible. The glow closed in like a wall, glaring white from every side. I could barely see the hood of my own truck, barely feel the road under tires. My only thought was forward. Gravel spit, engine screamed, every bump jolted through bone. Out of the fog, figures crowded closer to the roadside. Hundreds now, lining both sides like a ghostly procession. Some were in old pioneer clothes, some in miner uniforms, some modern, jeans torn and blood-stiffened. None moved, none spoke. Just eyes, black hollows, following me. I was running out of road. I knew it in my gut. Things in that place didn't want me to leave. And worse, they'd taken others before me. The signs kept appearing, hammering their words into my skull. Keep driving. Don't stop. The last one appeared so sudden I nearly hit it. Nothing left if you stop. That's when my engine sputtered. A cough, a choke. My fuel gauge, full at the last station, plummeted to empty. I screamed at that rig like it was a breathing thing begging it forward. And then, through the blind white blur, I saw black asphalt. Fresh painted lines. The real highway. With a shudder and roar, my rig broke through the fog like a ship breaching waves. Clear night greeted me, moon shining, stars spread above. I glanced back in the mirrors, nothing. No fog, no glowing headlights. Just an empty patch of highway behind. I pulled over, hands shaking too bad to hold the wheel. When I checked the map later, no road existed where I'd turned off. Nothing on GPS, nothing on paper county maps. I burned 15 minutes stopped afterward in shock, but my dashboard clock said I'd been gone over 3 hours. To this day, I avoid shortcuts. Truckers swap stories at diners about roads that don't belong, highways that eat the clock and spit you back changed. I keep my mouth shut mostly. But sometimes when I'm running across Appalachia at night, I swear I glimpse headlights behind me, hazy in fog that shouldn't exist. Maybe it wasn't a road at all. Maybe it was the mountains testing me, trying their hardest to keep me a part of their memory. And if I'd stopped, Folks wouldn't be hearing my story. Someone else would just be telling another tale about the travelers the road swallowed whole. I'm Henry, born in Wise County, Virginia, where the hollers run so deep light seems reluctant to linger. Folks around here pass down tales the way city folks trade hand-me-down coats, each one carrying a little more weight and fray. Some are harmless warnings, but others, you feel them lodge in your bones. One of those was about Miller's cabin, deep in a hollow nobody settles anymore. The story started with Elder John Miller himself. In the 1920s, he built a cabin for his young family. But within a year, his wife and 2 daughters were found dead inside, faces pale, eyes wide, bodies unmarked. Miller swore something in the night killed them. When no neighbors believed him, he hanged himself from a tree outside. The cabin rotted quiet for decades after, slowly sinking into the earth. Everyone local said to steer clear. They claimed it held shadows that didn't belong. You grow up around such stories. You half believe, but half laugh, too. My friends and I certainly did when I was 17. It was late October, chilly with the smell of wood smoke in the air when we had the idea to prove our bravado. I was with Caleb and Mark, boys who'd light a cigarette off a cross if it dared them. They suggested we hike up to Miller's cabin on Halloween weekend and spend the night inside. "You chicken, Henry," Caleb teased, grinning the way he always did when danger looked like a badge. We carried flashlights, sleeping bags, and a 6-pack, thinking ourselves immortal. The trail was faint, overgrown, but locals knew the way by instinct. By the time we reached clearing, dusk was sliding in, and the cabin loomed like a crooked box, one corner collapsed inward. Its windows were black hollows. Its roof dipped like a scowl. Inside, the place reeked, mold, wet rot, undertones sharp as iron. The floor was littered with pine needles forcing their way through gaps. The walls bent inward where time had pressed. We laughed to calm our nerves, made jokes about log mansion living. We clanked the beers, sat in the dusty center, light from our lantern throwing shadows far against warped boards. It was then, not 5 minutes seated, that I saw one of those shadows move, though none of us had. At first, I chalked it up to flickering lantern flame. But I kept staring at that shape. It stretched different from ours, bent strangely along the floor before tucking itself beneath a wall. Caleb noticed my frozen look. "What you seein', Henry?" He smirked, but when I pointed, he fell quiet, because all 3 of us were on the same side of the lantern. Yet there, clear under its glow, was a 4th shadow. Tall, spindly, cocked like it leaned against thin air. Mark cursed softly, tossing a pine cone at the wall. It thunked, but the shadow didn't respond. If anything, it lengthened, creeping further down the floorboards until it brushed our boots. The air grew colder, musty rot sharpened into sulfur. Our breath steamed. We argued. Caleb insisted it was our imagination. Mark whispered prayers half learned in Sunday school. But then came the sound from the ceiling. Scrape, scrape. Slow dragging, like claws raking wood above us. We lifted lantern light, but the rafters were empty. Yet the noise continued, circling around like something pacing just out of sight. I swore I felt a weight in the room, unseen but pressing, like the mountain itself leaned inward. The nails in the walls rattled, though no wind blew. In the corner of my eye, shapes twitched. The shadows weren't staying put. They darted quickly along planks, gathering in corners. We made the mistake of deciding to stay the night anyway. We were stubborn. We spread bags, forced laughter, tried drowning unease with swallows of warm beer. But no matter how we joked, none of us put our backs to the walls. Around midnight, true silence arrived. Even insects hushed. That's when the whispering began. At first faint as dry leaves, then sharper, multiple voices murmuring in tones just below hearing. The sound seemed to come from the very wood, as though the cabin itself spoke. Mark lost it. He covered his ears, muttering, "Stop, stop, stop." Caleb shouted into dark, "Show yourself, then." Bold words, but his knees trembled. The lantern flickered, guttered. With its falter, all the walls seemed to breathe. Shadows surged, filling cracks, swelling like fluid in wood grain. And in the largest black stretch, the outline of a figure took form. Not a person. Too tall, head scraping sagging rafters, its arms lengthening until its hands dragged along the floor, crooked and claw-like. From its head came nothing but a maw of deeper dark, and from that void the whispers grew sharper into one word: "Stay." That broke Caleb. He bolted for the door, only to slam against it as if some invisible pressure held it shut. He screamed, pounding fists until blood smeared wood. Mark curled on the floor sobbing, hands over his eyes, whispering the Lord's Prayer broken. I grabbed the lantern, desperation shaking me so hard I nearly dropped it. The figure loomed unmoving, but then it took one slow, swaying step. Every shadow followed. They peeled from walls, pooling across the floor, sliding under us, tugging. The boards groaned like a great weight pressed down. Caleb was yanked flat suddenly, his legs dragging across the floor as though pulled by unseen ropes. I lunged, seized his arm, and in that instant I looked down. His shadow wasn't his anymore. It stretched separate, writhing like something else wore his shape. "Don't look," I yelled, though I barely heard myself over the cacophony of whispers. With strength born of madness, the three of us crashed against the door one last time. It flew open with a scream of rusted hinge. We tumbled into dirt, cold starlight spilling across us. The instant we hit the clearing, the whispers cut. Inside, the lantern snuffed. The cabin sat quiet, windows black, as if nothing had happened. We didn't go back for our bags. We ran, stumbled through thicket, bruised and breathless until our town lit in the valley below. By the time my folks found us, Caleb's arms were striped in long, thin welts, marks running upward like fingers clawing to drag him back. Mark wouldn't talk for days, just sat shaking. I carried nightmares for years, dreams where shadows crawl up my legs and whisper through my teeth. Miller's cabin still stands. Local hunters sometimes say they glimpse lantern light moving inside, though nobody's lived there in near a century. Hikers whisper of shadows that don't match their owners when they pass too close. I'll tell you this plain. The cabin doesn't want you gone once you've stepped through its door. It collects company. It almost had us, and every time autumn slides back, I feel the same dread crawl along my spine, that if I look toward the ridge, the cabin might be looking back, whispering for me to stay. And the mountains. They'll help it remember. Name's Martha, and I've lived all my 71 years in a holler down Elk Valley, Tennessee. Folks moving through say it's peaceful here, with rolling mountains and creeks laughing through the stones. But people who stay, they know the woods out this way don't stay quiet for long. We've got owls, coyotes, whip-poor-wills, but we've also got those cries carried under the trees. And I don't mean animal. I mean crying, like a baby, sometimes like grown folks wailing their grief. I first heard it when I was a girl of 16 back in the late 1960s. We'd been warned plenty. Every family gathering, some elder wagging a finger saying, "Don't answer the crying. Don't you dare wander toward it." My daddy said mountain spirits used crying to trick you deeper, and if you stumbled into the wrong hollow, well, the mountains kept you, but teenagers don't listen. One humid August night, me and my friend Louise snuck out past curfew. She wanted to meet with a boy who lived 2 ridges over, and I went to keep her covered. The moon was swollen full, laying silver across the rocks. We walked the old logging trail, giggling, whispering plans where to meet her boy. Then it started. At first it was faint, a thin whimper like a baby fussing. Louise stopped mid-sentence, glanced sharp at the trees. "You hear that?" she asked. Sure enough, the sound welled again, louder, a baby's cry drifting out through the black timber. We froze, because no babies lived anywhere out this far. Nearest house was 2 hollers over, and yet there it was, a plaintive, shivering wail echoing from a thicket off trail. Louise's face paled in moonlight. She stammered, "What if it's real? What if somebody left a child?" Every instinct screamed to stay put. But youth can be cruel with its curiosity. Against every warning I'd ever heard, Louise darted toward that sound, pushing through brush. Her flashlight beam jittered ahead, bobbing until the trees swallowed her. I called after her, voice shaking. But in response came another sound, this time like a grown woman sobbing, desperate and ragged. The baby's cry and the woman's blended, wrapping around us until I couldn't tell where they came from. That's when I realized. The cries were circling. I gripped my flashlight tighter, heart kicking wild. "Louise!" I hollered, voice bouncing useless. The cries cut sharp, once behind me, then far right, then left, moving faster than footsteps ever could. Chills locked across my shoulders. I stepped forward against every shred of sense, calling her name again. After 20 yards, the undergrowth gave way to an old clearing. This patch of forest had burned decades back, leaving stones black and grass warped thin. In the middle lay something pale. I stumbled closer and realized it was fabric. Louise's scarf, snagged across brambles. That's when she answered. High-pitched, panicked, crying my name from deeper in the clearing. "Martha! Martha, come quick!" Relief surged, but then I froze. Because at the exact same moment her voice spoke again, only this time from the opposite side of the clearing. A second Louise, both screaming my name, one desperate, one angry, my legs nearly buckled. One of them had to be wrong. But which? Behind me the baby's cries grew shriller, like glass cutting air. Ahead, the woman's sobs curdled into a laugh, high-pitched, jagged, wrong. For the first time in my short life, I prayed out loud, begged God to walk me out of that hollow. I clutched that scarf and turned, bolting back the direction we'd come. Branches snagged hair, roots scraped knees, but I didn't care. Behind me, voices multiplied, babies wailing, women sobbing, men roaring, sounds that hadn't been human in decades. Then I saw Louise again, her real shape. She stumbled out from between trees, flashlight gone, face whipped raw. She was bawling. "It chased me," she gasped. Without question, we grabbed each other and ran blind downhill until the valley bottom finally met our yard fence. The moment we crossed it, silence dropped. No crying. Nothing but the chorus of crickets, like the woods had never raised a sound. We collapsed in the dust yard, lungs torn from running. Mama and Daddy came out furious, then froze when they saw our tear-streaked faces and the scarf clenched in my hand. We stammered our story. My daddy just bowed his head, sighed hard, eyes tired like he'd always known this day would come. "I told you not to answer," was all he said. The mountain don't cry for no one livin'. Louise wouldn't speak of it the next day. We made a pact to keep it secret, at least among friends. But that night and many after, she swore she heard her own name whispered outside her bedroom window, low and mournful. She moved out of Elk Valley before she was 18, swearing never to set foot back here. Me? I stayed, I married, raised kids, lived my life. But I never, not once, wandered those woods after dark again. And sometimes, on August nights when the wind warms the valley and the cicadas pause, I still hear it, thin cries curling under the trees, circling just out of sight. They come sudden, vanish sudden. I don't chase them anymore. I don't even look toward the timber. I know better now. That wasn't no abandoned baby, no grieving woman. It was the mountain itself, crying the way it remembers its dead, luring fools like Louise and me deeper so it can keep count. And I'll tell you the truth you can take to your grave. If you ever hear crying in the Appalachian woods, don't move. Don't answer. Don't show you've heard, because once you do, the mountain cries with your name woven into it, and that sound never lets go. My name's Dale, and I grew up in Letcher County, Kentucky, where the Black Hollow winds between hills like a snake in tall grass. Folks say the place is cursed not because of ghosts, but because of drums. Drums that echo at night, steady as war beats, shaking the hills from inside. I used to think it was just old folklore, borrowed from tribal stories passed down and twisted by mountain tongues. But in 1982, when I was 24, I learned the truth the loudest way possible. I'd been courting my sweetheart back then, and to impress her, I offered to walk her home the long way, through Black Hollow. Nobody traveled it after sundown. The nearest proper road avoided it entirely with a wide loop, and locals sent wagons around even if it meant hours added. But I was cocky, grinning under my coonskin cap, swearing love made me brave. She, Ruth Ellen, laughed and followed me, though her eyes darted uneasy every step. We entered the hollow just as the last light bled orange behind the ridge. Trees leaned in close, their limbs thick as rafters, blocking stars. The path dwindled, swallowed by mud and knotweed. The air turned heavy, like waiting for thunder. That's when it started. One beat. Low. Dull, like a palm slamming an enormous hide drum. It shook the ground beneath our boots. Ruth Ellen latched my arm, nails biting skin, whispering, "It's true." I tried to brush it off as distant quarry blasts, but another beat followed, then another, steady, measured, like someone counting our steps. Those echoes rolled up the hillsides, so deep you didn't just hear them, you felt them in your ribs. We hurried, hearts in our throats. Yet the beats followed, louder, closer. Between strikes, the hollow grew impossibly silent. No crickets, no whip-poor-wills, nothing but the waiting thrum in the earth. And then came a sound worse than the drums. Voices, not plain speech, a chorus chanting guttural words neither English nor any hymn I'd heard. The voices layered, some low like growls, others high-pitched screams, all in rhythm to those cursed drums. That's when Ruth Ellen slipped, falling in the mud. And in the moment we paused, the drumming doubled in pace, as if the hills themselves had noticed. I yanked her up, panic swelling. We ran, mud sucking at boots, branches whipping skin. The drumming sped alongside us, beating in fever rhythm. So loud, splinters of bark rained from trees. I swear the ground pulsed, each tremor lifting dust into the air. Ruth Ellen cried out she could see shapes. I swung my lantern wildly, and there they were, figures between trees, dozens. Black outlines, taller than any man, shoulders draped with hides, faces covered in masks carved from bark. Their hands struck invisible drums, yet no movement matched the earth-shaking sound. My throat dried. Every tale I'd scoffed at flooded back. Stories of tribes wiped out, murders buried in blood, secrets sealed beneath the hills. The old folks swore their spirits still marched, still drummed revenge against anyone trespassing after dark. And here those shadows were, staring us down through emptiness for eyes. The chanting pitched louder, words rattling my skull, twisting sense itself. Ruth Ellen clutched her head, moaning, "They're inside me." And, truth be told, I felt it too, like those guttural voices wormed into marrow, sinking heartbeat to drumbeat. We stumbled onto a stone circle then, right in the middle of the hollow. I'd never known it existed, a ring of mossy rocks waist-high, cracked and scorched. At its heart lay blackened soil, as if fire had burned there without end. The drumming surged, shaking me near to my knees. Then one figure stepped inside the circle, towering, masked, with antlers jutting crooked from its skullcap. It raised hands drenched in shadow, and all drumming stopped in one thunderous silence. The chant cut clean. My ears rang in the absence. It turned its head toward us. Slowly, deliberately, and Ruth Ellen screamed because its mask had no carved eyes, just holes that bled light. That moment froze my soul. The figure moved closer, silent yet heavy enough to make the stones tremble. The glow from its hollow mask flickered like fire inside a skull. With arms raised, it let loose a sound halfway between a roar and a drumbeat, vibrating through the entire hollow. And when it finished, every tree shadow bent toward us like soldiers bowing before command. I seized Ruth Ellen and ran blind. Every step struck against phantom rhythms matching our strides. My chest hammered. My lantern swung, sputtered, barely holding light. Behind us, drumming resumed, pounding triple pace. Shadows darted through trees, surrounding on both sides, too many to outrun. I don't remember falling. One minute I was tearing forward, next I was face down in gravel at the lip of the hollow. Clear starlit road ahead. The drumming cut like a switch. The air lightened. Beside me was Ruth Ellen, sobbing, mud-streaked, clutching me as though she'd never let go. Neighbors heard us stagger in later. When we babbled our story, they nodded grim the same way my granddaddy would when hearing certain tales. None mocked us. They just warned, Black Hollow drums for the living once. If it beats for you again, you won't come out. Years passed. I married Ruth Ellen. We never walked that way again. But sometimes, out late hauling logs, I'll hear it faint in the distance, thrumming low through the tires, beating steady in my bones. She hears it too, even in sleep, trembling awake, swearing the hills are chanting her name. Whatever beats inside that hollow, it's older than us, older than coal, older than cabins. Something the Appalachians held in their very soil, refusing to forget. And when the night air grows still, I pray I never hear it close again. Because if I do, I'll know the drumming hills are finally calling me home. For good. Name's Carl, and I was raised in Logan County, West Virginia, back when coal still kept nearly every house in our holler lit. Men here dug the seams, but just as many turned to quarry work, hauling limestone, dynamiting shale. Among the old-timers, one spot carried the blackest reputation, Lost Man's Quarry. They called it that, cause of an explosion in the 1930s that buried 8 men alive. Their bodies were never brought back, the rock face sealing their final breaths inside. Afterward, miners swore echoes of voices slunk out of the stone long after whistles blew, pleading, crying, begging. Some even said the fallen men's faces pressed into the rock itself, like the mountain tried spitting them half back. Folks avoided that quarry whenever possible, claiming ground there was hungry. When I was in my 20s, I worked for a haul company desperate for cheap limestone. One summer, they bid out pulling rock near the old quarry. I got assigned night shifts running loads from the ridge. I wasn't happy. Nobody wanted those hours. But work was work, and bills don't pay themselves. The first nights weren't bad, just back and forth, hauling gravel through foggy dark, headlights bouncing against cliffs. But one night in late July, things changed. It was hot, air thick as soup. No breeze whistled between the cuts. The quiet pressed like weight. As I loaded the truck, I heard it. Faint knocking. Tap, tap, tap. At first I thought it was loose chain clinking against the trailer, but when I shut off the loader, the sound kept steady, coming from the quarry wall itself. I froze, sweat dripping my back though the air felt ice-faint cold. Then came a voice. Low, hoarse. Carl. I swiveled, nobody around. Crewmates had already left earlier. My headlights struck the rock wall, and that's when I saw them. Outlines, vague against stone. Faces. Dozens, some barely formed, others clear as chisels, mouths open, eyes wide, meshed into rock like they'd been pressed through stone molds. Their lips moved, gasping. I stumbled back, heart exploding in my chest. But the sound followed. Faint whisper groans seeping from cracks. And then, deep under the earth, another noise grew. The low groan of shifting rock, like something alive stretching its jaws. I slammed the truck door, gunned the engine, and tore down the gravel path. Only, I swear every time my headlights raked the walls, more faces showed. Pale outlines swimming just beneath limestone, lips widening. Their eyes were hollow, but I felt them, angry, pleading, pulling me deeper with their gaze. Half a mile out, I stopped to calm myself, chest heaving. I told myself I was tired, too much dust inhaled, light playing tricks. But when I looked behind, I saw something impossible. The fresh rock from my trailer, shattered limestone chunks, was shifting, not sliding from truck bed, moving on its own. Faces etched across those broken pieces, mouths opening as one. I screamed and shoved the truck into gear, barreling blind through fog and whip-poor wills scattering, but the road seemed longer, stretched. Signs I usually passed never appeared. For miles it felt like the quarry clung to me, refusing to loose its grip. Then the truck lurched hard, tires skidding into ruts. I thought I'd blown a wheel. When I jumped out, shaking, I spotted something worse. Handprints. Dozens, maybe hundreds, rising in the dust along the side panels. Prints pressed deep, wet with residue black as coal ink. They hadn't been there leaving the quarry. They were forming now. I backed away, throat tight, watching as the imprints flexed, like hands were inside the metal, pressing outward. Suddenly, the air filled with sound. Moans, wails, choking cries woven thick like a crowd at a funeral keening. It rose straight out of the limestone hills towering the road. The sound swallowed everything my voice drowned. Over it came hard-pounding, deep rhythmic strikes, like fists slamming rock walls in desperation. That's when I saw movement in the ditch. Limbs, crawling shapes clawing up dirt. Their bodies were made of stone dust, arms jagged, torsos unfinished, faces contorted in agony. They dragged themselves inch by inch toward my truck, each strike of their palms echoing like a drum of earth. I scrambled back into the cab, fumbling for ignition as my lights died in unison. In that blackness, I swear to you, they surrounded the truck, brushing sides, whispering in a chorus, "Join us." Somehow, by miracle or madness, the engine coughed back to life with a roar. Headlights blazed, and for the briefest instant, every stone-etched figure froze, their rock-dust faces caught in screaming snarls around me. Then the truck jolted forward, tearing through them as if smoke. I didn't stop until asphalt greeted me, lungs bursting, mouth coppery with blood where I'd bitten my tongue. I pulled into a diner lot, shaking too bad to climb out. The truck's sides? Clean, not a handprint. Not a scratch, my load, untouched. Yet I remember what I heard most. The moans fading only after I'd cleared the valley, a final voice echoing soft in my bones. "We can wait." Next morning, I told my supervisor I quit. Walked away from quarry work completely. I shifted to carpentry, swearing never to set foot in blasting sites again. Some laughed, others smirked. But a few old miners just lowered their eyes, shoulders heavy. One muttered, "The quarry never stopped calling." To this day, Lost Man's Quarry sits bare, rains filling pits, weeds curling through rock heaps. Kids sneaking up claim they hear strange knocking from the walls, or that headlights catch brief faces etched just below the line of sight. Some say on August nights, the anniversary of the explosion, you can hear a roll call rising, each dead man's name carried on the wind. I know better. Those weren't echoes. Those were them. And the mountain wasn't just remembering them, it was holding them, hungry, waiting for more to join. When my children asked why I never let them near that hollow, I told them simple as scripture, don't answer the quarry. Don't listen if it speaks. Because once it marks you, the mountains will eventually take you back, face and all.
I've been running night freight long enough that the mile markers feel like a kind of prayer bead. You thumb them in your head to keep pace with what you can't see. 23, 22, 21. There's a rhythm to it that tells you if you're doing right by the grade and the clock. Clinch Mountain at night is one of those places where the dark sits on the hood with you, where your high beams find more air than rude and the reflectors blink back in little tired eyelids that seem to know too much. This was a Tuesday run, Knoxville to past Abingdon with a light load of dry food and paper goods. Easy pull, 32,000 gross. My Cascadia hummed the way I like, not a rattle out of place. The Eld had me on good time. I drink my coffee in gulps because if I sip it, I think too hard. The thermolid had that scorched metal taste I keep meaning to scrub out. Rain earlier had slicked the shoulders. The air off the vents smelled faintly of hot plastic and the lemon wipe I used on the wheel. CB on 19, as always. Chatter sparse. A driver somewhere fussing about a lane closure. A preacher selling salvation in hourly installments. The usual ghost voices you learn to let pass through. Clinch at night carries its own smell. Wet leaves, diesel, the cold metal of bridges even when you're not on one. I know the grade, I know the songs the engine sings when it's happy, the little shift in tone right around 1800 RPM when the mountain starts to answer. Oh, it was a clean night in the patchwork way late autumn gets clean. You can see farther, but there's less to see. The torn billboard on the right for a fireworks barn flashed by, the E long peeled off, so it just promised fur works. A clown holding a Roman candle with half its paint weathered to wood. I don't like clowns. I counted it without thinking. After that sign, I should see 21. Then the little pull-off where kids drink and throw bottles, then 20 at the big bend under the rock cut, and the pavement seems that thump, thump, thump under your steers like a worn-out heartbeat. The first 19 I took for granted. Northbound side, green and white, leaning just a hair from some winter plow that tapped it a couple years ago. I nodded to it like I always do. You get your markers, you get your grade, you breathe with the truck and keep your hands calm. Over on the fog line, in that smear of light where your beam falls off into black, something pale came and went. I thought it was a grocery bag. The way white plastic floats and skitters when a draft catches it, the way your mind wants to make a person out of it, because you're wired to look for persons, even where there aren't any. The cab clock ticked without me staring at it. 1:12. I had 3 hours before the eld would chirp at me for a 30-minute break. I was making good time, engine temp steady, oil pressure a solid hum, the way a dog is solid on your knee. The mountain took me. The grades steadied out. Somewhere a semi coming the other way flashed his lights to thank me for turning mine down. I touched the little St. Christopher medal my daughter taped to the dash as a joke a few years back. Saint of travelers, she'd said, rolling her eyes. The chain clinked. The air dryer coughed and released. It was a road like any other night. I didn't notice what I didn't notice until after the second 19. If you run the same skin knee of road often enough, you know exactly where the paint is worn, where the dot got lazy with the tar snakes, where the rumble strip cuts in early. Oh, slay. I came around a bend expecting 20 in the rock cut, and there was 19 again, green as new mint. You can pass a lot of things and shrug. Markers aren't one of them. For a second, I thought maybe I'd looked at the last one wrong. Maybe it was 91. Old signs is spun around by a prank. I don't make a habit of reading backwards, but I would have sworn. I talked out loud the way I do when the nerves get to whispering. Sure. When I stood there listening, the world had a new sound hidden in it. Soft skin meeting road and a rhythm that wasn't mine. A pad, pad, pad that my brain insisted on syncing with my breath even when I tried not to. I climbed back in before my courage could get stupid. The slash on the 9 gleamed in my headlights. I pulled the brake and let the truck rock forward to the gentle catch of the gearbox. Back on the road, I rolled 20, 30, 50. The CB squealed. Brake, 19. The next green sign slid up out of darkness like a tooth. Mile 19 again. No slash, clean as if I'd never touched it. The torn billboard came, the clown missing its eye. The barefoot kept pace at my fog line. Heel, arch, heel. I turned the radio off. The silence was worse. There's a dumb bravery that comes after fear has wrung you out. I told myself out loud so I could hear it. If the number won't change something I can touch. I took the center lane line and sat my wheels on it like a tightrope. I slowed to 40 on a stretch where the world thinks you're rude at less than 60. The truck felt huge, felt real, the seat vibrating with a note that came out of the bones of the frame, the shiver in the steering wheel that's never left since a pothole outside Bristol got me last winter. The L ticked the minutes forward indifferent. My odometer added miles like beads. The numbers obeyed, the signs didn't. On my fourth pass at that clown's blind face and the factory's hiss near the cut, I tried the high beams, then the fogs, then just my markers, reaching for some combination that would make the world show me what it had hidden. Shadows changed like they should. Water gleamed where water always does. A pair of taillights way ahead rose and fell in the way. Somebody rides a hill too hard. I pushed up to catch them out of pure animal need. Follow something that isn't stuck, and maybe you won't be. As I drew over the crest, the taillights tilted away, down, up. Then they either disappeared into a turn that shouldn't be where it was or turned into a reflection of my own patterns. Ha! The barefoot was beside me all the while, stepping along my life like it belonged there. At some point, the CB was back on without me turning it. The mic had spun on its cord, the button depressed a hair by the swing. "You got your ears on," the not voice said again. I swallowed hard enough for the pain to wake up my jaw. "I do," I said, which is the truth no matter what else was happening. "I hear you." My words hissed back to me as if thrown off a canyon wall. "It got your ears on." The beat of my own heart got into everything. The wiper motor, even though the windshield was dry. The tick of the hazard light in that one relay that sticks when it's cold. The thumplessness where I'd expected the pavement seams. I thought of a thing my father said once when we moved through a fog so thick the world shrank to hood length. If you can't see far, see close. If the mountain won't give you the long picture, let it give you the next 10 feet. So I watched for that. 10 feet at a time. The tiny glitter of crushed glass in the shoulder, a single black walnut sitting where a squirrel dropped it, the specific squashed shape of a possum I'd swear I'd already passed. The prints on the fog line began to look not like fresh wetness, but like permanent bruises on the paint, like they'd been walked a long time before me and would be walked after. I held my breath by accident and counted to 6, let it out, counted to 6 again, the way I do when sleep won't come at home. The clock on the dash kept perfect human time. 1:26, 1:31, 1:47, as if real life was happening in me while the road played a loop in front of me to see what I'd do with it. When the 18 finally arrived, it did not announce itself with trumpets. It just sat there as dumb and green and human as any sign, one less than 19, exactly like the way we count would have you believe the world works. No fireworks billboard. The clown gone. There was an exit advertisement for a diner that hadn't been lit in years, the kind of ghost light you trust more. The fog line was empty. The prints became the normal scuffs that happened to paint. I didn't breathe again so much as realize I had been breathing the whole time wrong. I didn't stop. I didn't want to give the mountain the satisfaction of me stepping out and becoming part of whatever game it had been playing. I went all the way to the drop, rolled into the valley like somebody coming out of a movie into daylight. The first truck stop glow hit me hard, that orange sodium light that makes tired men look worse. My hands shook when I keyed the card at the pump. My ELD said I'd been on the grade 41 minutes. My internal clock swore it had been longer. Hours, something old, diesel stink brought me back. A kid with a baseball cap and a nose ring asked me if I had a smoke. "A quit," I said, and he nodded like he understood it was about more than cigarettes. Inside, under the hum of refrigerators and the lie of coffee that's been sitting too long, I tried to tell a driver at the next table. He wore a hat that said Bluefield and had that mountain polite you don't mistake for softness. "A 19 catches you," he said after he let me stumble through it. He didn't ask me to explain. He didn't make a joke. You answer that channel, you can get stuck listening to yourself. Don't pull off by the number. If you gotta stop, stop where there ain't a number. He stirred his coffee like it mattered. "I run clinch daylight if I can help it," he added. "If not, I keep to the middle and mind my breath. Ain't nothing up there wants you. It just don't mind if you stay." Back on the road, I could have sworn the CB whispered with the radio off. Just a hush, the syllable of air at the edge of words. 1-9. At home, after 2 more drops and a dawn that came up pale over the yards, I sat with my girl's lunchbox, jokes, and the dog asleep on my boot, and I thought about how we count when we're scared. We count to pull the world into a string we can hold. I don't have a story with a hard edge to it. I didn't see a face, I didn't save a person, I didn't wreck. I have a number that wouldn't move and a foot that didn't tire. I take the long way around Clinch now on nights when I have the hours to burn, and when I don't, I ride the center and keep my hands soft and my breathing honest. And when the signs tick how they're supposed to, I say thank you for every one, like each number is a thing that had to choose me back.